Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into an intersection that is honestly just mind-bending. We're going to look at how a 2,000-year-old ancient Eastern text, the Bhagavad Gita, somehow perfectly collides with the absolute bleeding edge of modern theoretical physics. We're going to decode something I like to call the talent spark. It's this deeply fascinating concept straight out of Chapter 10 of the Gita, and we're going to break it down into super easy-to-understand language, using examples from modern science and the everyday world around us.
Now, I know it might sound kind of crazy to mix ancient scripture with hard science, but consider this for a second. The actual founding fathers of modern physics were absolutely obsessed with the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, when he was witnessing the very first atomic bomb test, J. Robert Oppenheimer famously quoted the text, saying if the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, it would be like the splendor of that great being. These giants of science, they clearly saw something incredibly profound in these ancient words. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this massive contrast in your head. On one hand, you have the incredibly epic, poetic imagery of ancient chariots clashing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra from the Mahabharata. And then, on the exact opposite hand, you have these sterile whiteboards, strict mathematics, and complex lasers of a modern quantum physics lab. At first glance, they seem utterly incompatible, right? No way they relate. But as you'll see today, these two completely different worlds are actually describing the exact same underlying reality of our universe. To really wrap our heads around this, we need to zoom in on Chapter 10 of the Gita. This entire chapter is dedicated to a concept known as Vibhuti. Vibhuti translates roughly to an extraordinary manifestation, a prominent expression, or a divine glory. Getting a handle on this word is absolutely crucial, because it lays the groundwork for understanding what this universal spark actually is, and more importantly, how it pops up in the everyday world, right in front of us. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how Chapter 10 systematically breaks the whole idea down. It explains how the Supreme Lord, or if you prefer, the ultimate universal energy, acts as both the intelligent cause and the material cause of the universe. This is a super important distinction. We're not just talking about a creator sitting way out in the clouds making things. We're saying it is the very material the universe is fundamentally built out of, the whole shebang. Think about it. Using this classic ancient analogy, gold. You can have a gold ring, you can have a gold necklace, or maybe a gold coin. The names change, the shapes change, the utility changes, but at the end of the day, you are literally just looking at gold in different forms. The Gita is teaching us that this wildly diverse universe we see around us is simply a physical manifestation of one singular ultimate energy. Everything you see is actually just that supreme energy taking on countless different shapes. The text actually gives us some really concrete examples of where this ultimate energy, this Vibhuti, is the most concentrated and visible in the natural world. So among the deities, it's Indra. Among the great sages, it's Bhrigu. Take the animal kingdom, it's the mighty lion. And among rivers, it's the sacred Ganga. These are basically the absolute peak expressions of that divine spark occurring naturally in the world. So the crucial point is captured so beautifully right here in Chapter 10, verse 41. It says, whatever that is glorious, prosperous, or powerful in any being, that know you to be a manifestation of a part of my splendor. This right here, this is the core thesis of the talent spark. It means any exceptional talent, any spark of pure genius, or any incredible power you witness in any being, that is a direct, highly concentrated spark of this divine universal energy. And the brilliant thinker Swami Krishnananda really helped modernize this concept for us. He pointed out that this talent spark isn't just restricted to ancient rivers or mythological figures. Not at all. It appears right now, today, in everyday human excellence. When you see incredible artistic capacity, breathtaking literature, unexplainable musical genius, or, hey, even brilliant administrative leadership in a company, you aren't just looking at regular human skill. You are quite literally witnessing a spark of that ultimate divine energy manifesting through a person. It's wild to think about. Now, you might be wondering at this point, okay, how does all this ancient mysticism and talk of divine sparks actually map to modern quantum physics? Well, I want you to imagine for a second how these 2,000-year-old philosophical concepts perfectly align with our modern, strictly mathematical understanding of the universe. Because once you put them side by side, the parallels are they're absolutely stunning. Let's start with the fundamental nature of the soul, what the Gita calls the Atman. The text famously states that the soul is never born, it never dies, it is entirely indestructible.
Okay, now let's flip over to the first law of thermodynamics and the conservation of quantum information. Modern physics tells us quite clearly that energy cannot be created or destroyed, and quantum information is never truly lost. It's literally the exact same principle, just wearing a different lab coat.
So, if you look at it through this framework, death isn't the end of existence. It's really just a phase transition. Just like energy changing forms from, say, heat to light in a physics lab, your core energy information, or Atman, doesn't just vanish into nothing. It simply moves to new hardware, a new body, without any of the core data ever being lost. The software, that essential spark, remains completely constant.
To really understand the deep interconnectedness of all this energy, let's talk about quantum entanglement for a second. It's this totally mind-bending phenomenon in physics, where particles remain deeply connected, instantly influencing each other, no matter how far apart they are in physical space. Albert Einstein himself famously called it spooky action at a distance, because honestly, it completely shattered all the rules of classical physics. Now, flashback to the Gita. There's this incredible moment where Krishna reveals his cosmic universal form to Arjuna, right there on the battlefield chariot. He basically pulls back the curtain to show that all planets, all universes, and all living beings are fundamentally woven together into one single unified whole. Thousands of years before humanity had the math to prove quantum entanglement, the Gita was vividly describing a deeply interconnected, universally entangled consciousness. It's like they already knew. Let's move to and see how this builds into practical application. The Gita spends a lot of time talking about achieving perfect balance and reducing our mental agitation. They call these vrittis. Think of it as basically building yourself a mental thermos. In thermodynamics, when you approach absolute zero, entropy, which is essentially chaos, reaches an absolute minimum. By following the disciplines outlined in the Gita, you're essentially cooling down your karmic noise. You're achieving perfect energy efficiency and hitting zero spiritual entropy. You know, it is so easy to get lost in the heavy jargon of either science or spirituality. There's this classic ancient parable about a group of blind men trying to describe an elephant. One feels a leg and shouts, "It's a pole." Another feels the trunk and says, "No way, it's a club." A third guy feels the ear and says, "You're both wrong, it's a fan." They're all arguing passionately, but they're all touching the exact same animal. And honestly, that is exactly what we are dealing with here. Whether we are using the strict, rigorous mathematical language of quantum mechanics to talk about wave functions and conservation laws, or we're using the beautiful poetic Sanskrit of the Bhagavad Gita to talk about the Atman and the talent spark, we're ultimately just describing different parts of the same boundless ultimate reality. We are just using two completely different languages to describe the exact same truth. Which brings us to a really fascinating conclusion. If the laws of physics only explain the raw mechanics of the universe, but the Gita explains the actual soul and the energy behind it all, where will you look for the talent spark tomorrow? Are you going to see a beautiful piece of music or a brilliant scientific breakthrough as just, ordinary human effort? Or will you recognize the universe brilliantly expressing itself right in front of you? I challenge you to keep your eyes open for that spark. Thanks so much for learning with me today.